The winter sun hovered low over the fading fields of Elmshire, casting long, gold shadows on the farmhouse that had stood for generations. Inside, laughter and the faint clinking of dishes filled the air. To anyone passing by, it looked like a picture of a happy family dinner, but beneath the warmth of that old oak table, resentment had begun to rot. Russo sat quietly beside his father, his hands calloused from a lifetime of work. Every scar on his palm carried the story of a season plowing through rain, fixing fences, feeding cattle when storms cut through the valley. His younger brother Daniel sat opposite, crisp in his tailored shirt, a phone on the table like a trophy. Their father's voice cut through the chatter. "We'll have to decide soon what happens to the land when I'm gone." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Their mother's smile faltered. "Henry, please, not tonight," she whispered. But Henry was firm. "No more waiting. This land is our legacy. Russo has worked it his whole life." "He deserves, Dad," Daniel interrupted smoothly. "I've been managing the finances, the contracts, the taxes. Without my work, we'd have lost this farm years ago. You can't just hand it to him." Russo's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. He'd had this argument before, in the quiet spaces between chores, in the lines of his father's tired face. He knew Daniel's kind of work was polished, loud, always visible. His own was silent, the kind that no one noticed until it was gone. "You both contributed," their mother said softly. "Can't we know?" Daniel said sharply. "It's not fair. You've always treated Russo like the favorite son. Maybe it's time you saw who really keeps this family alive." Russo rose from the table, eyes dark with exhaustion. "I don't want to fight you, Daniel. You want the land? Take it. I've had enough." He turned and walked out, the cold night air biting at his face. Behind him, his father's voice cracked. "Russo, come back." But he did too. Nights later, the storm rolled in. Sheets of rain pounded the fields as lightning carved the sky. Russo sat in his small cabin by the edge of the property, staring at a cup of untouched coffee. A sudden knock shattered the quiet. When he opened the door, 2 police officers stood there. "Mr. Russo Hayes," one asked, "you're under arrest for arson and attempted fraud." The world tilted. "What? That's insane," he whispered. "The barn, it burned down tonight," the officer said. "Your insurance claim was filed this morning. In your name." Russo's throat closed. "I didn't." He looked past them at the flames in the distance, orange against the rain. His family's barn. Their father's pride. He was cuffed before he could speak again. At the police station, Daniel arrived in a black coat, face pale but voice calm. "I can't believe you'd do this," he said, shaking his head for the officers to see. "I warned Dad, your temper would ruin everything." Russo's heart broke, not at the accusation, but at the emptiness in his brother's eyes. No fear, no sadness, just calculation. "You set me up," Russo whispered. Daniel leaned in slightly. "You were never meant to run this place. You belong outside those gates, not inside them." The trial was quick. The evidence, forged documents, fake insurance receipts, and emails Russo never sent was enough to ruin him. His parents sat in court, broken. Their mother wept quietly. Their father refused to look up. Russo wanted to shout, to beg them to believe him, but something inside him stopped. He realized it wouldn't matter. Daniel had won their trust long ago. He was the golden boy, the one who saved the family with his cleverness. Russo was the stubborn one, the brute who didn't understand business. When the judge read the sentence, 3 years in prison for fraud, Russo only nodded. The first year in prison was a blur of noise and silence. He spent his days doing the only thing he knew working. He cleaned, fixed, helped. He learned to read people, to listen instead of speak. Sometimes at night, he would sit by the barred window and picture his mother's hands brushing the dust off the porch swing. He imagined his father standing in the field watching the clouds. He thought of Daniel smiling at the dinner table. Something inside him hardened. 3 years later, when the gates opened and the air hit his face, he didn't feel free, just empty. The farm was gone, sold. The house was decaying, the fields wild and overgrown. His father had died 6 months before his release. His mother lived in a small apartment in town, frail and tired. She looked at him with eyes full of shame and sorrow. "He died believing the papers," she whispered. "I tried, Rousseau." "Daniel," he stopped her. "Don't," he said softly. "I know what he did." Rousseau found Daniel Isley. His brother had bought a sleek new house near the city, marble floors, glass walls, and a garden he didn't water himself. He was successful, married to a woman who knew little about the past. Rousseau stood outside that house one evening, watching from the shadows. He didn't knock. Not yet. Weeks passed. Rousseau took a job at a local repair shop under a false name. He worked quietly, saved his money, and waited. He wasn't angry anymore. Anger burned fast and bright. He needed something colder, something patient. He learned that Daniel was still expanding his business, still hungry for more. He also learned that Daniel had enemies, small debts, quiet threats, favors owed. And so Rousseau began to build something invisible, a web. He contacted those Daniel had wronged. A contractor unpaid, a lawyer discarded, a woman betrayed. He didn't tell them his name, only offered help. He sent them files, recordings, documents he'd found in old family boxes, proof that Daniel's wealth was built on forged papers and stolen land deals. One by one, Daniel's allies turned silent. His company faltered. The investors withdrew. His name, once clean, began to stain. Then one morning, Daniel woke to find an envelope on his doorstep. Inside a single photograph, their old farmhouse, overgrown and empty. On the back, written in steady handwriting, "Everything built on lies eventually falls." Daniel froze. For the first time, the polished confidence cracked. He called Rousseau's number disconnected. He drove to their mother's apartment, but she refused to let him in. "He's gone," she said quietly through the door. "You took everything from him. Let him have his peace." Rousseau, meanwhile, had returned to the edge of the old land. He stood under the same oak tree where his father once rested. The air smelled of rain again. He whispered to the empty fields, "You are right, Dad. The land knows the truth, even when people don't." As dusk fell, the farmhouse lights flickered for the first time in years. Rousseau had rebuilt the generator, restored the old well. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming what had been stolen, not just the land, but his dignity, his place in the story of his family. But fate wasn't finished. As he closed the door that night, a car pulled up at the edge of the drive. Headlights cut through the dark. Daniel stepped out, rain dripping from his coat. "Rousseau," he said, voice trembling, "we need to talk." Rousseau didn't answer. He only watched him, the brother who destroyed him, standing in the same mud they once played in as boys. For a long moment, neither spoke. The storm rolled closer, lightning flashing across the field. That's when Daniel said quietly, "They're coming for me, Rousseau, and you're the only one who can save me." The rain began to fall harder, washing the years between them into the earth. Rousseau's eyes narrowed, his voice calm and cold. "Then maybe," he said, "it's time you felt what it's like to be on your knees." The thunder swallowed the silence that followed. The rain had no mercy that night. It fell in waves, soaking the ground, the air heavy with the smell of mud and memory. Daniel stood trembling in the downpour, his eyes darting between the shadows in Rousseau's face. They're coming for me, he said again, voice cracking. You don't understand, they'll kill me. Rousseau's expression didn't change. He leaned against the doorframe, silent. The storm's echo thundering between them. You should go to the police, Rousseau said finally. Like you told me to do when you framed me. Daniel flinched. Rousseau, please, he whispered, stepping closer. I made mistakes. I know. But this is different. These men, they don't forgive. Rousseau stared at him for a long moment. The years of betrayal replaying behind his eyes. The courtroom, the cold nights, the look on their father's face. But beneath the anger, something in Daniel's voice cracked with real fear. Who? Rousseau asked quietly. Daniel hesitated, then said, the Corelli Group. I borrowed money for an expansion. When the company collapsed, I couldn't pay them back. They want everything, the house, the business, my life. Rousseau turned away and walked inside. Daniel followed, dripping water onto the wooden floor. The farmhouse smelled faintly of old dust and oil. A house half live again. On the mantel, their father's photograph watched them both, stern and silent. Why come here? Rousseau asked. Daniel swallowed hard. Because no one else will help me. For a long time, Rousseau said nothing. He poured himself a cup of black coffee, the same way he used to during winter mornings before sunrise. Then he spoke, his voice low but steady. You destroyed my life for land and money, Daniel. You let me rot in a cell while you built your empire on my ashes. Now you want my help? Daniel dropped to his knees. I know, he whispered. I was jealous. You were everything I couldn't be loyal, strong, loved by Dad. I thought if I had the land, I'd finally matter. But I lost everything. The wind howled against the windows, the farmhouse creaking under the storm's weight. Rousseau stared at his brother, this man who had once shared his bed as a child on stormy nights, terrified of thunder. Somewhere deep inside, the boy he once was felt the faintest ache of pity. Get up, Rousseau said, finally. You're pathetic on the floor. Daniel stood shakily. You'll help me. Rousseau's jaw clenched. I didn't say that. Turned away, staring out the window at the rolling dark fields. If they come, they'll come here, and I won't hide you. But as night turned into dawn, something in Rousseau began to shift. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silence so deep it felt sacred. Daniel sat by the old fireplace, shivering, his once perfect suit torn and wet. Rousseau watched him, remembering every harvest they'd shared, every argument, every lie. He couldn't forgive him, not yet, but he also couldn't ignore the blood that bound them by mid-morning. 2 black cars pulled up on the dirt road. Rousseau saw them from the window. They're here, he muttered. Daniel's face went pale. Please, Rousseau, he begged. Don't let them take me. Rousseau didn't answer. He opened the drawer beneath the counter and pulled out an old revolver at their father's. He checked the chamber, loaded, and looked at Daniel. Hide in the cellar. If they find you, you're on your own. Daniel disappeared into the shadows of the cellar just as the men stepped out of the cars. 3 of them, coats dark as tar, faces sharp and expressionless. The leader, a broad man with silver hair, called out, Rousseau Hayes. His voice was smooth, almost polite. Rousseau stepped onto the porch, gun in hand but lowered. That's me. The man smiled faintly. We're here for your brother. Rousseau tilted his head. He's not here. The man's smile faded. I think he is. Daniel owes us quite a lot, and I hear you owe him nothing. Maybe we can make a deal. Rousseau didn't blink. What kind of deal? The man's tone softened as if they were discussing weather. Give him to us, and your name stays clean. No one ever has to know what he did to you. You walk away free. For a moment, Rousseau's heart stilled. It was the offer he'd once begged the universe for a chance to be clean again, without the weight of his brother's shadow. He looked at the field behind them, the wet soil where he'd bled, where he'd buried years of pain. His finger tightened around the gun. Then he said quietly, "You know, my father used to say that a man's worth is tested when no one's watching. I failed that test once when I walked away from my family. I won't fail it again." He lifted the gun. "You want him, you'll have to go through me." The air exploded. The men scattered, gunfire tearing through the silence. Russo dove behind the porch post, wood splintering beside him. He fired twice, hitting one man's shoulder, sending him spinning into the mud. The leader shouted, "He's not worth dying for, Hayes." Russo shouted back, "Maybe not, but I'm done letting people take what isn't theirs." The fight lasted minutes that felt like hours. When it was over, the men were gone, dragging their wounded with them, leaving behind tire tracks and the smell of gunpowder. Russo stood in the rain-soaked yard, chest heaving. Daniel crawled out from the cellar, face white. "You could have given me up," he whispered. "Why didn't you?" Russo looked at him, eyes hard but calm. "Because I'm not you." For the first time in years, Daniel wept, quietly, brokenly. He sank to his knees, mud clinging to his clothes, and whispered, "I don't deserve this." Russo nodded slowly. "No, you don't. But maybe I need to remember who I was before you took everything." In the weeks that followed, the brothers stayed in the farmhouse. Daniel helped repair the roof, cut the grass, rebuild the fences. It was strange seeing him work with his hands without pretense. They didn't talk much, but the silence was no longer violent. It was cautious healing. Russo wrote to the county office, reclaiming the old property deeds that had once been forged in Daniel's name. Bit by bit, the land was returning to its rightful state. One afternoon, Russo found an old box in the barn inside. A letter their father had written before he died. The handwriting was weak, but clear. To my sons, it read, "You both carry parts of me. Russo, my strength. Daniel, my wit. I failed to teach you that one without the other destroys the soul. When you read this, I hope you'll forgive each other. Not for me, but for yourselves." Russo sat in silence for a long time. The words cut deeper than any wound. That evening, he handed the letter to Daniel. His brother read it slowly, then folded it, eyes shining. "He never stopped believing in you," Russo said quietly. "Even when I didn't." Daniel nodded, tears sliding down his face. "I wish I could go back," he said. "I'd change everything." Russo shook his head. "You can't, but you can start now." In the months that followed, the farm bloomed again. The fields turned green, the fences stood straight, and the house finally felt alive. Russo and Daniel worked side by side, sometimes talking, sometimes not. Forgiveness didn't come easily, but it came in small, silent gestures. A shared meal, a mended tool, a nod across the field. Then, one summer morning, Daniel left without saying goodbye. Russo found a note on the table. "Brother, you gave me more than I deserved. I'm leaving to make things right with the people I hurt. The farm belongs to you now, as it always should have. Thank you for saving me, even when I ruined you. I'll spend my life trying to be the man Dad hoped I'd be. Daniel." Russo read it twice, then looked out at the horizon. The fields shimmered under the morning sun, the wind moving through the wheat like waves. He felt no anger, no sorrow, only peace. Years later, when townsfolk spoke of the Hayes brothers, they told two stories, one of betrayal and one of redemption. But Russo never corrected them. He knew the truth, that sometimes blood doesn't bind you because it's perfect. It binds you because it endures. And every evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, he'd walk to the edge of the field, stand beneath the old oak, and whisper into the wind, "We're home, Dad. The land never answered, but it didn't have to. It remembered.